Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stephen King Cast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King. Each week, I will review one entry in the bibliography of Stephen King in the chronological order of publication, and this week, I continue my examination of The Outsider, in which I examine episodes 2 and 3. Okay, so I do apologize, guys. I have been meaning to get an episode out. I thought for sure I was going to be able to cover episode 3, and then episode 4 came out. So what I'm going to be doing today, rather than doing a deep dive into both of these episodes, I am going to really just sort of give my general thoughts on both of these episodes. And first, I'm going to start off with the fact that I fully acknowledge that I have forgotten to talk about Lock and Key, which is right around the corner. It comes out next week, guys. That's a big deal. Lock and Key on Netflix. I really like this trailer that was released. I think it's a lot of fun. It looks like a mashup of 80s Amblin movies meets Harry Potter. There's a whimsical feel to it. There's definitely magic in the air. There's a sense of adventure and danger and excitement and everything that I would want from it in a way that I wouldn't have expected it or knew that I wanted. It is there. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to review. I've said before that I will review. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go in depth. If I can't keep up with The Outsider, I cannot promise that I'll be able to give you all of my thoughts on Lock and Key when it comes out. But at some point, I will get to all of my thoughts on it, my general thoughts on Lock and Key. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to read some iTunes reviews because I cannot do this without you guys. So up first, I have someone, not a podcaster, wrote 5 stars, nothing better. There's nothing better than finishing a King book and then coming here and listening to the corresponding episode. And then, thank you, not a podcaster. And then Kryptonian Orphan, which is an awesome name, gave me 5 stars and rated it by saying, I enjoy this podcast almost as much as I love reading Stephen King stories. Great podcast, fantastic host. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And guys, if you have any spare time on your hands, feel free to write in at iTunes. It will give me a huge boost and will help me out greatly. Also, if you have some time on your hands, feel free to write in to StephenKingcast@yahoo.com. I'm going to read some, it sounded like Porky Pig there. I'm going to read some listener emails right now. Up first, we have Jake, who writes, I'm a huge fan of Joe Hill. I've yet to read Joe Hill's contributions to DC, but I believe he is doing more. I started reading his work when Lock and Key was still releasing regularly. That was before I knew he was Stephen King's son. Then I read Throttle by him and his father, and I found a new love for Stephen King all over again. Also, did you watch Creepshow on Shudder? I'm going to interject. No, I haven't had a chance to watch that yet, but I'm going to hopefully get around to Shudder because there's a lot of good stuff on there. Sorry to go on and on, but I was also wondering if you read any more of Owen King's. I have not. He has some comics background as well as an adaptation of his and his father's work, Sleeping Beauties, coming in February. Anyways, thank you so much for the response. My wife is not much of a horror fan. Any chance I can ramble on and on about my love for the King family and horror in general. I'm working on getting both of my kids into it. My daughter loves The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon pop-up book. Thank you again for all that I do. Jake, thank you so much for writing in and keep your love of horror going through your children. That's fantastic. Constant reader. I'm just finishing up the top 10 works of Stephen King of the past decade episode. Such retrospectives often make me reflect back on my own personal experiences with King. I've been a constant reader of King since about the age of 16. I'm now 31, so just about half of my life I've been obsessing over his works. I always knew the name Stephen King even as a child. It was probably due to my dad's love of the Salem's Lot and Carrie adaptations. Also, I recall a greater respect for King's work spiking with the release and subsequent countless airings of The Shawshank Redemption on cable. I would occasionally see the adaptations of his other work on TV. Some of them were great, Stand By Me, and some of them were not so great, The Langoliers. While I was always a reader of books, I did not gravitate towards King's written work right away. This may be due to my having a resistance to reading books. A book if I've already seen the adaptation. When I was younger, I was ignorant of just how prolific King was with his writing. Growing up, my family and I would often go to shore in New Jersey for vacation. I would love these trips as a child, but of course, as I grew older, I would dread them with the typical teenage cynicism. I will always remember the day I strolled into a beachside bookshop looking for any excuse to have just some time to myself. During my search, I came across an entire bookcase dedicated to Stephen King. I saw the usual suspects of King's bibliography, but there was a book I had never heard of called Eyes of the Dragon. Looking like an easy summer read, I paid for the paperback and retreated to the air-conditioned house we were renting. Over the next few days, I devoured the book. King blew my mind, showing me different perspectives of the characters in the book, including the antagonists. Shortly thereafter, I learned many of King's works were connected to, and some characters crossed over to the other books. I followed Flagg into the Dark Tower books, and then, of course, became a Tower junkie. I read all the Dark Tower books in quick succession, along with many other Dark Tower adjacent books that shared similar themes. Similar to how you explained your relationship with King, my fandom certainly went through ebbs and flows. I would discover other writers, other books that drew my attention, but time and time again I would find myself coming back to King if he had just written a new book that sounded exciting. During one stretch of ignited interest in King, I found your podcast, which had probably been running for a year at that point. Just like getting hooked to the books themselves, I became totally enthralled in listening to the episodes of the books that I had already read. Your analysis was always thought-provoking and enjoyable. It also felt gratifying listening to a fellow Dark Tower fan discussing the series, as well as the Easter eggs to the series and other books. While everyone was familiar with a lot of King's works, for a long time the Dark Tower felt like a secret world that not everyone was privy to. And a lot of people that had heard of it didn't quite gravitate towards the strange melding of fantasy, horror, and Western themes. I recall during one podcast you had remarked that it had been one of your favorite books. As unfair as it may be since the mediums are totally different, I still hesitate to read a book if I had already seen the adaptation. However, with your praise of the book as well as news that a new adaptation was in the works, I went ahead and downloaded the mammoth text on my Kindle. Over the next few weeks, I got lost in the haunted city of Derry. I fell in love with the Losers Club. I felt like I was 12 years old again, hanging out with my friends in the Crick, Delaware County PA's version of the Barrens, out back of my house. I was terrified of Henry Bowers as well as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. While enjoying my horror books and films, few of them ever really frightened me. On a few different occasions during my reading, I experienced sleep paralysis episodes with Pennywise standing just beside me. Of course, in those moments, it was pretty awful, but after the initial shock, I had to marvel at the writing and the world-building King had put into the book. I agree with you that this book serves as a sort of essay and maybe King's final say on the horror genre, and I thank you for recommending it so highly. Apologies for the insanely long-winded email. Finishing up, I just wanted to say thank you for putting out such an incredible podcast for so long. I admire your work ethic as you are able to read these books very quickly and also record podcasts with such detailed analysis. I'm in the midst of completing the first draft of a novel, and you certainly are an inspiration to me with the sheer amount of quality content you have produced. The Stephen King Cast is, and I suspect will always be, my favorite podcast. It was very easy. It was a very easy 5-star review to write on the Apple Podcast app. Thank you. I hope you and your family have a very happy and healthy new year. Long days and pleasant nights, John. John, that's an incredible email. Thank you so much, and thank you for the 5-star review. And I'm really glad that you were able to experience the wonder of it. And congratulations on working on your first draft. That is just doing the work is the hardest part. So just get it done, and do as Stephen King says, put it in a drawer and then go back and then cut 30%. And, if you haven't read On Writing, make sure you pick it up because it's an incredible resource at your disposal. Knowledge. If I sound distracted right now, it's because I just took a look at my pool. It is currently February 2nd. I've been battling with my tarp, and it's because my water level has been decreasing, and the reason is I just discovered a leak in my pool, and I have this little pinprick of a hole that is just shooting water out, so I can't get that off of my head. Since getting this house and inheriting this pool, it wasn't in great condition to begin with, and I've just been struggling with it, and as I'm recording, I am just contemplating whether or not I get it repaired, which will be costly, or if I just tear the thing down, which would be, it would suck for summer. At the same time, it would kind of be hassle off of my shoulders. Anyway, that's what I'm going through at the moment. Anyway, then Nathan writes, I'd like to thank you for a great decade wrap-up episode. It was comprehensive and emotional. Very well done. As many of your listeners would agree, your podcast is very much a part of our highlight reel of this past decade. I remember when I first saw your podcast in iTunes. I had just finished up reading The Stand for the first time. I had never been a big reader, but the TV miniseries was formative, and I had always meant to read it. In my mid-30s, I suppose it finally hit that I'd better start reading before my time ran out. Midlife crisis much? Yet at this point, you were only a few episodes in, so I made a mental note to circle back round again once you had gotten to The Stand in your epic reread. Very shortly after that, you did get to The Stand, which gets me to my point. What makes your podcast so incredible is that each episode functions as an appetizer for the meal that is the book being discussed, or is it dessert? Your podcast inspired me to read 900-page books I never would have gotten around to if not for your inspiring, passionate discussion. It has been the victory lap in finishing such doorstoppers. None of it is work, it is all joy. I've read and enjoyed books that you may not have enjoyed, but I knew there was value there, and I've enjoyed books that you've loved, yet have had fallen through the cracks of the popular culture. Digging so deeply into a singular author encourages deep thought and enjoyment of a medium that so easily gets brushed off as IP to be mined for feature films. The books are what matters. Reading is what matters. Stories that reveal ourselves to ourselves are what matters. I suppose a question that could be asked is, why Stephen King? My answer is not because he writes horror. I generally have no interest in it. But I know that the universe is a scary place. So much happens beneath the surface level of reality that is out of our control. I think King's characters are forced to confront this lack of control over the chaos of reality and sometimes discover wisdom on the way. In a lot of ways, I also think that King was processing the psychic wounds of the 20th century, both culturally and personally. Born poor, abandoned by his father, losing his mother in young adulthood, then rocketed to the excessive heights of success, definitely is a mythic journey, practically a superheroic one, and he helped guide generations through their greatest fears because he had already faced them. And he knew and still knows that eventually our fears do come true. It's dark, but it's therapeutic and luckily very entertaining. To briefly circle back before I wrap this up, I was absolutely shocked when I read The Stand and fully experienced the terror of Randall Flagg. He was charismatic, manipulative, and always knew what you wanted, but made sure he got what he wanted first. And I realized that this was a very insidious evil. Every bully I've ever witnessed, every villain in history, yet somehow very few villains in fiction suddenly came to this harsh focus. For this reason, I could never reconcile a Stephen King fan ever being supportive of President Trump. He hits every single note of the Randall Flagg archetype. We are living in Flagg's Vegas, or at least the impending threat of such state. I hope we can make a stand and reveal the villain for the pathetic creature he really is. Take care, Nathan. Nathan, thank you for writing in for the kind words. And yes, I've been thinking a lot about King's villains lately, and when they, in the end, when they are revealed to be their true selves. Spoiler alert for Needful Things and for The Dark Tower and for It and for The Stand and for The Dark Half. And for Under the Dome. I mean, when it comes down to it, all of these powerful creatures are nothing. Spoiler alert for Wizard and Glass. But I mean, there's a reason why the imagery that King presented in Wizard and Glass resonates so strongly. It's because he has been obsessed with the concept of the man behind the curtain for most of his career, and he has exposed most of his villains, the ones that we think of as the most powerful, truly as the man behind the curtain, that when confronted and at the verge of obliteration, the spider, It, the eater of worlds, begs and pleads and mules for his life. Randall Flagg, the big bad of Stephen King's works, always runs away. I mean, make no mistake that when confronted, he runs away. He ran away in The Stand. He ran away in Eyes of the Dragon. He runs away in Wizard and Glass. He is taken out like a punk because he's just a blowhard in the Dark Tower. Leland Gaunt again screams and begs at the end. All of his characters are nothing. They are revealed to be really just weak and are hiding behind bluster, and that is very applicable to a lot of people in power right now. And the fact that there are those in this world that want to believe in the appearance of power, that they want to believe in Oz the Great and Terrible, because that is a sign of strength. But I just don't know if these people have been able to actually see behind the curtain. And for many of us, we have seen behind the curtain and see weak men. And so yeah, and I think that that's something that King has done very well, is be able to tell the story of weak men for a long time. I'm gonna give just some thoughts on episode 3 about what I like about episode 3. So remember that episodes 1 and 2 really had that True Detective, the Night of style, and here in episode 3 it starts to shift into a glossy high water mark version of like a really good X-Files episode. And there's nothing wrong with that. But now we start to get into supernatural, and we have agents of the law investigating supernatural activity. And it's creepy. This episode 3 and leading into episode 4 is where the immediate horror of the events that have occurred in episodes 1 and 2, which occurred within reality, we start to leave that and start to really head into like traditional horror creep show, creeptastic, spookiness. Just think of the barn, everything with the barn, that sense of dread that's there, the mist around the barn as the sun begins to set. It really does feel like that moment when vampires are going to come out. I love when the sun sets at night. There isn't a day that goes by where the sun isn't setting and I say to myself, I got to get home before the vampires come out. The barn really felt like that. The old cemetery being there. It's a wonderful jump scare. There's the mouse, and just the sound of the mouse always, to me, signifies, great, Dracula stories. And everything with Terry and Glory's child it's genuinely creepy. And it shouldn't be. It's just a child speaking about her dreams in the middle of the day. And it shouldn't be creepy, but it is creepy. It's very creepy. The director, Andrew Bernstein, of I believe he did episode 4 as well, taking the baton from Jason Bateman, he makes a wise choice to frame this particular scene in the day. It presents a level of safety and reality that should make everyone feel at ease, but it swings in the opposite direction. The outsider is now encroaching upon everyone's understanding of reality and threatening to pop the bubble of safety that we have built for ourselves. All right? And I'm going to talk in this moment really about 2 things for the rest of this particular episode, because now I'm just going to mix episodes 3 and 4 together. All right, so just some other thoughts about creepiness. I mean, this continues in episode 4 with the, as and I'm going to get to her in a second, but as Holly is investigating the background and the other cases that are similar to Terry's, ultimately getting to El Cuco, I can't remember. Oh my God. But this legendary folkloric figure that pops up in multiple countries and multiple versions of folklore. There is a real threat lying in the darkness that we get beginning in this episode and leading into episode 4. And one thing that I just really like is what Julianne Nicholson is doing. Julianne Nicholson, who is a Stephen King movie alum, and I forgot to mention this in the last episode, but of course you might remember her from Storm of the Century. So it was great to see her again in another Stephen King property. But she is doing really good work. And she's not just being the grieving wife or the grieving widow and the grieving, mother. She is going through her own arc, and she's trying to hold her family together She's trying to figure it out, and the work that she's doing is really, really good. And her just working with Jeannie in these scenes, both of them, they have their own agency. Jeannie is trying to help in her own way because she trusts her husband. She's not saying that her husband isn't perfect and didn't make a mistake, but he did it in a way that he thought he was doing something right, and his mistake caused pain. But she can support the healing process, and she's going to. And just having these two women who have endured the loss be with each other and be in the moment, it's just really, really well done, as is Glory's reaction to the woman that has come in and is really a reporter and trying to get a story, and just how intelligent Glory is to snuff out and protect her family. It's really good work, and it's actually one of the highlights of every episode in what is every week a highlight of my week. Okay, but I really have to talk about the big deal of episodes 3 and 4, and that is the introduction to Cynthia Erivo as Holly Gibney. This is a big deal. Things happen in episodes 3 and 4, but this is where we are introduced to Holly Gibney. And this is not the first time we have seen this character presented on screen in a live action form. The first actress to take this role is Justine Lupo of Succession fame. She also plays her on Mr. Mercedes. And this is a different version of Holly, and what an incredible version. So I had wondered in the trailers if Holly was going to be supernatural. And it appears, though, yes. I mean, her in the books, Holly is autistic and observant, and her observation skills indicate her as a savant. This is different. This basically, she kind of has The Shining, if you want to read it that way, and I'm fine with that. This is still a story about people living in the real world, and Richard Price has done an amazing job at being able to build the reality of the world that Holly lives in, and it feels real. Her interactions with everyone and how attuned she is to everything, to the point where it's always overwhelming her. It is an interesting take. The actress is doing a phenomenal job with it. I like everything about Holly. The fact that it just completely shifts from Ralph's story, basically, to Holly. That's, in the span of 4 episodes, there's a lot of jarring moments. We thought that it was Jason Bateman's story, and then Jason Bateman is killed. And then we think that we're going to follow Ralph. And then in episode 3, we are introduced to a major figure, Holly. So this rapid succession of changes in perspective could be enough to alienate the audience, but Richard Price is doing such a good job at creating such a focus within every episode that it allows this baton to be passed, and it is an incredible performance. It's a really cool interpretation of this character that I just really, really like it a lot. So this is a very slight episode. I do apologize. Unfortunately, I just really like this show. It's a really good show. And I'm running out of ways to say it's really good and I like it. If you're not watching it, please do. There's just, I love Sunday nights because of HBO. They rarely lead me astray, and I'm glad that this has joined the pantheon of all-time great 9 o'clock television events on HBO. So, guys, 24 minutes. I'm sorry. I've lightly covered 2 episodes, but they're good episodes. I don't know what my next episode will be, whether it is sort of like a check-in with The Outsider, because I don't know if I'll be able to do weekly episodes. Or if I'll be able to talk about lock and key, but definitely something will be coming soon in the next couple weeks, one way or another. So I will definitely see you then. But like I said, if you have a couple minutes on your hands, feel free to head on over to iTunes. Please leave a review. If you have any thoughts on The Outsider, write into StephenKingcast@yahoo.com. And I will see you here. May you have long days and pleasant nights. And I'll see you here next time where MOON spells Stephen King Cast.